Today on Costume News, making the notorious English gown. It's finicky, it's precise, it's a pain in the tuchus. Will Jackie finally conquer the pleats, or will she end up losing her mind? Only time will tell. Hey y'all, and welcome to the Struggle Bus. I'm your host, Miss Jackie, and today we're doing a practice round for my robe à l'anglaise. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're returning, welcome back to the insanity, my friends. In this video, we're going to discuss the English gown, what makes it English, and why this is such a difficult project for a first foray into costuming the 18th century. Then I'll walk you through my mock-up process for my real English gown on retroussée, where I'll attempt to wage battle on this notoriously hard to make. And a note, this won't be a direct how-to. That'll be in the final English gown video where I turn myself into a 1770s David Bowie. And if you haven't watched the rest of my videos in my Glam Rock Goes Rococo series, you can check that out in the playlist linked in the description below. What the heck is an English gown? English gowns are around for the majority of the 18th century, starting in about the 1720s and spanning through the 1770s. While the style does change throughout this time period, the distinguishing feature does not: the fitted pleats on the back of the gown. The entire back is cut in a single piece, including the skirt, and then pleated down to fit against the body. This is in direct contrast to the other ubiquitous dress of the 18th century, which is the robe à la française, or sac, which has a pleated panel of fabric that covers the back. As we hit into the 70s, the English gown starts to go out of fashion to be replaced by the Italian gown, which is similar in style, except it's cut in two pieces instead of one, and the back pleats turn into pretty curved seams, which are much easier to do. My inspiration. I picked the English gown for my first project because I liked the way it looked, especially the later style worn en retroussée. I'm basing my gown design on this one from the Museum of New Zealand, though if you watched my pannier video, it's going to be considerably wider. Why is this so freaking hard to do? It's the damn back pleating. It is fiddly as all get out. You gotta pin and fiddle and pin and fiddle and pin and fiddle and pin and fiddle, and oh my god. It's gotta lay perfectly against your body with no wrinkling or ease, and it has to look gorgeous because it's the centerpiece of the gown. It has to fold nicely over top the pleating on the skirts. Ugh. Manipulating such a large amount of fabric into such an inorganic shape, it's almost impossible to do unless you have someone doing the pleats on your body or you have an accurate dress form, neither of which I have. Commence the struggles. A better beginner's option would have been the Italian gown or the française. I deliberately didn't choose a française because it takes so much fabric and I'm on a budget. Because I'm trying to replicate this crazy photo of David Bowie in this wide jumpsuit, I knew I wanted to go for more of a style with hits instead of a bum, which is why I didn't opt for the Italian gown. Regrets. Why a wearable mock-up, Jax? Because of the difficulty of this project, I knew I'd have to do the whole toile from start to finish. I didn't want to go through all of that with just muslin only to rip it out. I knew I'd cut corners out of laziness too. Originally, I was looking at doing another full anglaise using some cheaper cotton, but I couldn't for the life of me find anything I liked that was reasonably priced. And since y'all know I'm all about the stash busting, I thought, hey, I don't really have a lot of places to wear a full English gown, so why not make something I can wear on an everyday basis and use some of the fabric that's been in my stash for years. So I pulled out 3 yards of gray quilting cotton with a fun red and black polka dot pattern. I love this fabric and I've been holding onto it for the right project. An added bonus, the petticoat of my real English gown is going to be red, so I could potentially wear that under this as a slightly more historically inspired history-bounding outfit. I am going to warn you, this is not one of those videos where I'm like, oh, this is so difficult, only to knock it out like it's nothing. No, it's hard.
No, it is, isn't it?
This is going to be a struggle from start to finish. It was a struggle even before I began, because I bought the pattern for this gown before I did my research. And what company did I end up using? Some of you will already know the answer to this. It's a well understood, if not often discussed fact in the community. So I'm going to say it here for those who are uninitiated in hopes that they don't waste their money and time like I did. I bought the pattern from Reconstructing History. Mistake number 1, 2, 3, and mother effing 4. So, if you enjoy watching me consistently run into issues, make sure you hit that like button so YouTube knows you enjoy watching masochists torture themselves. Will I conquer this make? Will I manage to make something I'm actually happy enough about to wear in public? Let's see. Okay, this weekend I unpacked this pattern and was all set and ready to get the lining pieces cut and start on this venture. And I took a look and had some questions. So this pattern company has a questionable reputation for a reason, and I'm going to flip this camera and show you precisely why that is. All right, so here is the gown back, okay? It's graded for size. All the way down, right? Okay, here's the skirts. The only place the skirt is graded is at the top. So it's assuming that as you get larger, you don't get wider, you get taller. I don't understand this. Wouldn't the grading be, I don't know, at the width of the skirt so that as you get wider, your skirt gets wider? And then again, I've already cut this out, but the back bodice, as you get wider, you get taller, people. This is a new concept for me. I sure don't get taller when I get wider. So when I made that discovery, I sort of was like, F this, and I just went to my Patterns of Fashion 1, which is over here. We'll take a trip. Okay. And this is essentially the dress that I wanted to make anyway, so I scaled it up on my computer. I tried this on without my stays, and I definitely am going to have to grade it up, and then I will cut out this questionable monstrosity, because who knows, maybe my instincts are incorrect and it's perfectly fine. So I'm going to cut it out and do the same thing as I did with that guy, which is to, you know, cut two and tape it together and just check it with my stays on, see if it is better. I'll make a decision on which pattern I'm going to use and then go ahead and start grading. Okay, so I filmed this whole segment only to discover days later when I finally listened to the video that the microphone was halfway off and my sound didn't record. So I'm going to have to paraphrase. Here are the two different patterns, one from the questionable company and the other from Patterns of Fashion 1. As you can see, the general shape of the bottom pieces are very similar, but the top bit is where things get weird. After trying on the pattern, I discovered the purchase pattern fits me width-wise much closer than the other, but the other pattern fits my short torso better. I like the bodice of the pattern from the book better than the one I purchased. The straps are just thin rectangles of fabric instead of the weird angled strap. When I put that one on, I was getting that obnoxious gape in the arm side. So what I'm going to do is Frankenstein the pieces together using the width of the purchased pattern and the top points of the other, taking away some of the torso length in the process. To do this, I lined up the Patterns of Fashion pattern up to the other and sort of split the difference. I drew the top of the book pattern, making sure to align it in a way that made sense with the width of the other. This is where French curve really comes in handy. So here you see my completed, changed pattern. It's a happy medium between the two pieces. I did the same for the front piece. Here you can see the differences between the two, including the strap change and the shortened height. I'm using some plain white cotton muslin for my stash for the lining. I'm adding an inch seam allowance for the side for the fitting bit and making the straps longer. This is pinning number 1. It looks pretty good in the front. I have a little bit of wrinkling on the side here. I did have to, no surprise, take it up about 2 inches on the waist because it was too short and it's wrinkling, and almost all of the wrinkling I think has to do with the shortened waist. Except for maybe over here. So this is what's happening in the back. I have to say that trying to pin this on myself has been extremely difficult. At this point, I'm really not sure how much of this wrinkling has to do with the fact that it's not pulled tight enough, or whether it has to do with the weird way I've got it pinned. I am going to take this off and, well, I'm gonna mark all of my seam lines. I'm gonna take it off, repin it together off my body so that I can try and true up the lines in the back. Another thing, my back seam, my side seam is like here, and I kind of want to move it over a little bit, but I cannot, I can reach, but I cannot reach and pin at that point, especially on this side. This side was much harder for me to pin than this side, and I'm left-handed, so you'd think that reaching the right side would be easier, but for some reason this arm is more flexible. In any case, so I'm going to mark the seam as it is, and then mark where I want the seam to be and move everything over. I think I have enough excess fabric on the front to make it work. If not, I may have to do a little piecing. The other thing I'm going to do is up here, I'm going to make this just a little bit taller, because you can kind of see my stays lacing, and I think I need to modify where my lacing little stay strips are. I think I need to move them down so that it's not crossing so high up my neck, but I'm also going to take this up just a little. I'm going to go ahead and cut here where I've folded this up, and I'm hoping that will help a little bit with the wrinkling. One thing of note, these have stayed up the whole time. I've never had a pair of straps fit me better. So that's one plus, and I'm pretty happy. Let's look at the front first, because the front has less issues. Here's my one strap that remained pinned. Here is the waistline, and I'm gonna cut this off. I'm gonna cut all of this off. Here is the side that I marked, and I'm not sure if you can see this on the camera actually. It's kind of faint. It's also really wonky. I'm gonna trust it. I'm gonna trust that. But what I am gonna do is I'm gonna move this over a little bit, because if you look on the back, my instinct of where to put the side seam was actually correct. And I couldn't see this while I was wearing it, but I was going for this spot right here, which is actually my seam between my side back and my center back. So I think my instinct was right, and that's where I'm going to end up putting my seam. So what I need to do is take this in, follow the lines, and pin the back, actually pin the back while it's on the ground to where I need it to go. The one thing I am going to do is I'm going to cut this, because here is the line where my waist breaks, and honestly I think it's too long and it looks like a ducktail. So I'm going to kind of start from there and kind of take this angle and just go a little bit shorter. That's the plan. I really don't want to do this, but for the sake of being able to pin this on myself without having to contort, I'm ripping my center front seam that I so nicely sewed, and I'm going to be pinning from the front. And then that way I can pin the two sides together where they need to be, and hopefully won't have as many issues getting it to fit. Here are my two pinned side seams. Am I going to have to adjust this? Absolutely. But hopefully it'll be a little bit easier now. Alrighty, here is fitting number 2, and I think we've got what we need to get. All right, let's look at the back. It is wrinkling just a little, but I think it's good enough that we can use it. And I am really glad that I did the center, even though it's been kind of a pain to keep this pinned. It was so much easier to get in, and it's so much easier to pin this time, although it was still a bit of a challenge. I definitely say if you have anybody who's willing to help you fit this, have them fit you, because this has been kind of a struggle. This is round number 3. So I took everything off and I trued up the seams on this side, and then I gave myself a 1/2 inch seam allowance, cut off all of the excess, and then made everything symmetrical. I then basted everything back on, And for the most part, I'm pretty happy with it. I am having a weird little thing happening right here. I got kind of like a weird bubble there, but it's the seam kind of goes. Now, I did add a little bit at the back. I'm still not quite covering the cross of my straps, but I think if I'm gonna change where the tape is on the back of my stays, I think that's gonna help a lot. One small change I want to do, the side seam here kind of cuts in a weird spot. So I'm gonna add just a little triangular gore here, boop, and then use my French curve to sort of fix this ducktail because this feels like just like flapping around. It feels really excessive. So I'm gonna do that, but otherwise this is good to go. I undid my careful pinning, trued up all my lines, and traced the finished pattern onto some blank paper. Then I smoothed out my edges using a French curve. Yesterday when I was drawing this out, I had an existential crisis and had to stop and walk away from it. I could not figure out how the heck I wanted to close the front of this mock-up. I was having such a hard time getting it pinned into my stays when I was doing my last fitting the other day that I didn't want to pin it into the stays, and I just could not wrap my mind around it. But today on my walk, I was able to reset and rethink, and I realized, duh, Jackie, like, close it the way it's supposed to be closed and put lacing strips in it and make it overlap so that it gets bigger and smaller instead of just being a one size fits all. I don't know what I was thinking. Sometimes I overcomplicate things. In any case, let me show you the modifications I'm going to make to this bodice real quick, and then we'll get everything cut out. First, I cut out my existing drawing. As you can see, I trued up this curve a little bit. I don't understand why this is curving back. I also have some reservations about the fact that this is curved now because this was a straight line in my pattern, and it was sewn straight when I did my first fitting. So I am going to straighten this line out. I'm going to leave this here so that I know that that is my seam. I'm also going to straighten this. I will test both options. From there, I'm going to take 2 inches from here. So this is going to create my overlap so that if I gain weight, I can get it closed. From there, I'm also going to mark 2 inches from the straight edge. And that's where I'm going to cut my bodice, is this 2 inches from the straight edge. And if it is fitting wonky, then I'll cut into it. Last night, off camera, I cut out the rest of the purchased pattern and promptly made some decisions. My bodice shape has changed so much. I mean, it's just, the shape is so different that I just decided to if you get that, leave a comment below and let me know, and I will give you a gold star. This is what I've done. So I've taken my bodice pattern, added 3.5 inches to it because that was the difference between the back bodice piece and the lining bodice piece on the purchased pattern, and then taped it together. So I now have a Frankenstein pattern. Obviously for the real gown, I will be using this piece, but since this is really only going to be a peplum, I only need this width. I did cut out the lacing strip. Now, I'm not going to cut this out this big. It doesn't need to be this big. Anyway, I'm going to, make it that big. And the neckline binding pieces from the purchase pattern, I will still use those. And then this is the sleeve, and it's huge. When I kind of wrapped it around my arm, I realized that this is actually the pattern sleeve for the earlier English gown. So we're looking at, the 1730s, 1740s, where you have that big sleeve, and all of your shift is coming out of it. That's what this is. So I am not going to use this sleeve pattern at all because I'm already going to have to adjust the sleeve head, and I don't want to have to adjust the width too because I'm going to have to take it down so much. Instead, I'm going to use the actual sleeve from the Patterns of Fashion sleeve and grade it out to meet the width that I need. So now what's going to happen is I'm going to cut out my fabric. I'm going to cut out the bodice and the bodice back and all of the linings, or I'm sorry, all of the binding and stuff. And then whatever fabric I have left over, I will use for the sleeves. Now, I have 45-inch width fabric. This is just standard quilting cotton I got at Joann's and years ago. And so the pattern actually wants you to use 60-inch fabric so that you can fold it and cut this whole thing as one. And I was thinking about just piecing it together, but if I open my fabric up, I can get these, at least all of the skirt pieces cut pretty easily. I also think because I have so much fabric, I'm gonna make the skirt longer. While it's folded like this, I'm going to cut out my bodice, making sure that I actually cut it on the fold so that the pattern matches on each side. I'm gonna cut this out. I'll cut my facing bits, my neckline and my strap, right? Because we gotta have a strap. Cut this stuff out here, and then I will worry about the bodice back. All right, these two strips are for the lacing strips. All I'm gonna do, these are cut on the straight grain, so the grain goes this way. I'm gonna fold them hot dog. Well, I guess that's hamburger if we're looking at it this way. I'm thinking this way, that's hot dog. And I'm gonna sew up one of these sides with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we'll turn it up and put eyelets and then sew the eyelets on it. After cutting out my back pieces and the skirts, it was time to get to the hardest part, the pleating. Okay folks, couple of housekeeping notes before we start. Firstly, I've already f***ed up. I was supposed to cut the center back on the fold. I didn't write that on my new pattern, so I cut it on the selvage edge because I was trying to match this and then didn't even match it. No big deal really because it's going to be hidden. We're gonna do a box pleat, but I did have to sew that. The next step I had to do was to sew the skirt front panel to the skirt back panel on each side, leaving 8 inches open for the pocket slits. Yes, I'm going to try and wear my 18th century pockets with this. I do have a little bit of a concern about them hanging down beneath the peplum. However, if that is the problem, then I have plenty of fabric. I'll just add a little extension to the skirt until it covers up the pocket and put a ribbon around it. I've got red ribbon somewhere, I've got black ribbon somewhere, so no big deal, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so for the sake of time constraints and to avoid repetition, I'm not going to go into detail about the construction of the bodice from here. Given that this is a mock-up for the real deal, I'd rather explain everything to you in the actual gown construction videos so that I have the practice under my belt, so to speak. I'm going to speed through the construction bit and only show you the modern adaptations that will end up being different from the final gown. On and off today, I've been fiddling with these pleats. I found that once the pleats were down, it was much easier to adjust them to the size I wanted. Originally, they were all kind of even, but with the later styles, we really want the pleats to be narrower, so I did have to undo the box pleat in the center and adjust to get a little more width on the one side because they were uneven, but I managed to get them together. And I'll take you for a spin here. They look pretty even. They're the same size-ish. So now what I'm gonna do is really quick, I'm going to pin down the sides to the seam allowance and then try it on. I already have my stays on and see how they fit. I had to film the fitting so I could actually see what was going on, so here I am testing the back. After an insane amount of time back stitching and hand basting, I sewed the skirts onto the bodice and pressed toward the lining. Then I sewed the lining and bodice straps on, sandwiching them in between the bodice. I then turned the outside seam allowance in towards each other and hem stitched them by hand to finish the outside edges. Hey y'all, it's been a minute. I came to the realization the other day that I did almost all of this off camera. Whoops. That's okay because you're gonna see almost all of it in the video when I actually do the dress. But let's talk about my mock-up and a couple of the things that I still need to fix. Now, first, there is some wrinkling happening in the center front, but I think that that is user error and not anything to do with the construction of the gown. I haven't quite gotten the pinning thing down yet. One thing that's bothering me is I made this just a little too short. As you can see, my stays are peeking out underneath this, and I have like a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. I can't bring this down anymore. Also, this side of the skirt is too far back. This is where my pocket is, which is not acceptable. I hate to do this, but I'm actually gonna take out most of this side of the skirt, widen the back pleating out a little bit, and then pull this up so that it hits this point. One, to cover my stays, and two, because it's uneven and it's bothering me. Yesterday, I put on the sleeves, and despite the fact that the sleeve fit before I pinned it and the sleeve fit after I pinned it, the original sleeve, I mean, my sleeves didn't fit. And I spent hours yesterday stressing, trying to get the sleeves to fit. I had a friend come in, help me pin this on my body, and I'm so glad that she was willing to do that because it took about 5 minutes and my sleeve is pinned. Now it's not quite pinned all the way and I have to pin it under the underarms. That's going to restrict my movement a little bit, but if I put this here, I can still lift my arms up. Once I get the sleeve in and once I get this skirt fixed, this will be completely finished and I'm really excited. I think it's turning out really well. First order of business was to rip out the pleats. Oh, this hurts so bad. I had to iron everything out first and then mark my new spots and re-pleat. To fix the sleeves, I marked the front point, back point, side seam, and sleeve seam on the sleeve and the corresponding marks on my bodice. Then I took the sleeve off. I made sure the sleeves were gathered to the same length. Rococo, rococo. Rococo, rococo. Rococo, rococo. Rococo, rococo. What am I gonna wear today? Rococo. BRB. Let's go. And there you have it. I love this dress. I'm not sure how often I'll wear it into the office because it takes so long to get into, but I think it's super cute. The sleeves are definitely a little wonky, and I know I'm going to have to redo them for the gown, but for this particular purpose, I'm totally okay with the little wrinkles. Also, the tail of the skirt is kind of weird, but when I wore it to film the reveal, I hated it less. Part of the issue has to do with adding the extra hem and with it the ribbon. If I'd cut this out of the right length to begin with, I could have leveled out the hem properly and not had the weird little ducktail in the back. But that's okay. If anyone asks, I did it on purpose. And I'd also like to note how comfortable I was. I filmed this outside in Texas at the beginning of June. It was above 90 degrees Fahrenheit already at 10 a.m. and I was literally running around and doing cartwheels. Everything stayed in place. I didn't have any pins come out, and the hottest part of the whole ensemble were the jeans. That should come as no surprise to anyone. So what do you all think? Would you rock an English gown in the office? How do you feel about doing wearable mock-ups? Let me know in the comments below. I'm curious. Up next for this project is the last in the series, the video of me making and becoming a 1770s inspired Ziggy Stardust. The gown is already well underway, and I can say it's moving much faster the second time around. What's really going to slow me up this time is the trim, because there's a lot of it. So I'm not sure if that'll be the next video I put out. I am trying to do a 2-week schedule, fingers crossed. If you want to know when that video does come out, you can click the little bell for notifications. I'm thinking in the interim, I might release the video about my butt veil, or maybe put out the instructions on how to make a medieval block with duct tape. If anyone has a preference, let me know. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, and if you'd like to make my day, leave me a comment down below to introduce yourself, share what you're currently working on, or even leave me a joke. I would love to hear from you. That's about it for me. I'll see y'all later. At some point in this video, I'm gonna knock all of the shit off of this ironing board and you're gonna hear a crash. One thing that is really bothering me is that I made this a little bit different than that was a pin. It's the damn black pleating. It's the black pleating. Well, they are black. They are black pleats. Black back pleats. Say that 10 times fast.